meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Well, today my guest is Jody Golston. Jody is a mom of 3 girls and a small business owner. She has walked this road of adoption and foster care from both the perspective of a parent and on the other side as a kinship caregiver. So she uses her experiences to encourage and mentor other moms who find themselves involved in foster care through her support group called Tangled Hearts. Jody, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I feel honored.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I have to say right away, I grew up in a family of 3 girls. So right away, that kind of grabs my heart. I was the middle child.
Yeah.
Am the middle child.
That one's giving me a run for my money.
Sometimes we do that. Okay, well, let's get started here. I want us to start with, what did your life look like for you growing up? Like, let's just kind of think way back to the early days when you were a child. What was that like for you?
I am the oldest of 4 siblings, and I grew up with a alcoholic mother, and every partner she had was an alcoholic as well. Until I was... We moved around a lot from different states, all over the country. And at 11, she met my stepdad, the father of my youngest brother. And so that's the only dad I've really known. I never had a relationship with my biological father, and he passed away about 11 years ago. So it was a difficult childhood to navigate. I've always felt like the mom and took that role on a lot. I'm happy to report that my mother celebrated 2 years sober this year. So that's been amazing.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
So Jody, that your childhood is, I mean, you were filled with a lot of different people, it sounds like, that were kind of the adult figures in your life, but like you said, all of them struggling through addiction. So what did that look like in the home? Was the home environment pretty chaotic?
Yeah. My mom, she worked in restaurants a lot and short order cook. And so it just required us to stay home a lot by ourselves. And so that's like why I ended up taking on the mom role a lot. And I mean, I feel like she tried her best. I didn't really understand her addiction until I got into my own later in life and what that looked like. And so it really pieced it together for me. And it put a lot of things to rest for me. And so just knowing that her alcoholism wasn't due to the fact that she loved us or didn't love us, it was just the fact that she didn't love herself, and she was just trying to numb that. And so I ended up gaining a lot of respect when for that part of our story. All my siblings and I are really close, and they view me as a mom figure as well. And so that's been a little bit hard to navigate. And
wow. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting that you said, you recognize later on that it wasn't a love issue about loving you or not loving you or your siblings. It was not loving herself. I think that's really important to hear.
She never received the love that, love and parenting that she deserved either. And so it just is generational for sure in our family.
Yes. Yes, that happens, unfortunately, all too often, doesn't it? So when you were young, kind of living in this season of your life, when you thought about life ahead, what did you think about? Were you even dreaming of the future? Were there things that you were like, I hope for, I wish for, or were you kind of just in
I
survival
was in
mode?
survival mode all of my life, up until about my senior year in high school. And that's like where I
Mm,
kind of started dreaming. Like I had to figure out what I was
mm,
going to do after the safety of school and the safety of those adults that protected me all those years during my school time.
mhm,
And so, not really. I had always dreamt of being an artist of some sort.
mm,
And those dreams were kind of, kiboshed when I was told,
mm,
artists don't make money, so you better find something else to do. And so I didn't really know what to do.
mm,
I explored being a teacher or a nurse after high school, before I got out of high school. And I come from a very poor family. I had no idea what even a 4-year university was, how to get there, what that looked like. And so I knew right away that that wasn't going to be an
mm,
option for me. I convinced myself it wasn't going to be an option for me. And so my senior year in high school, I graduated. I had a really great high
mm,
school experience. And after I graduated, I literally woke up the next day and was like, this is real life. What do I do now? And so my own personal struggle as, a legal adult started
mm.
right after that.
Wow. So we know that at age of 26, that's when addiction really became real for you. But I would like to hear, and we'll talk about that, but I would like to hear from 18 to 26. You said what kind of led up to
So
becoming
from
stuck in
18 to
addiction?
26, I worked. I just worked full time and was trying to build my life. And at 22, I met my oldest daughter's dad, and we were together, and we ended up having our first child when I was 23. Things were good. I just didn't feel like they were good enough for her. And that was a big struggle for me, is that I always wanted to provide better. And
Mm,
now I know it's a little bit to do with postpartum as well. And so that relationship ended, and I just had got together with multiple men between that time and 26, and tried to raise my daughter to the best of my ability. And we moved a lot, and I didn't make the best decisions. I didn't
mm,
start using drugs until I moved from Oregon to Arizona to marry my high school sweetheart. And found out after I arrived there, he had a pretty big opiate addiction, and I had given up our whole lives here. And so trying to navigate that
mm,
was one piece.
mm,
I found out I was pregnant with my second child, his child, and living in a new state, I couldn't get state insurance right away. So we moved up our wedding, and the day of our dress rehearsal, I went to the doctor at 4.5 months and found out I miscarried. And so that miscarriage catapulted me into wanting to
mm,
numb out. And I didn't know how to deal with that pain. I had no family or friends around.
mm,
I couldn't, I couldn't beat him, so I joined him. And
mm.
that's really where my addiction took off, as at 26 years old.
Hmm. Wow. And like you said, you had no one around to kind of show you anything different. And so what you saw was addiction. And that is why it's so important that we as God's people are coming alongside the foster care community, those in pain, those struggling, because they need to see a different way. And we should be able to show them a
Right.
different way because we can point to Jesus. Hmm. So, okay. Yeah, let's talk kind of about, you said drugs became a coping mechanism, a way to numb. Just kind of walk us through that process. And did addiction come quickly? Were these drugs that you just,
It did.
it kind of took over fast? Or
No,
was it
was
something that kind
quick.
of slowly
I started
happened?
doing cocaine, and it was kind of my end all be all. I loved it, and I thought I didn't know what I was missing. And it made it so that I didn't have to think of everything over here, that I could be high and not think. And that worked out a lot better for me. And so my cocaine addiction moved into opiates, to doing pain pills and selling pills. And that was a different world for me. I had never been in that kind of environment before. And then from pills, it went into methamphetamines, and it took over my life. And that's like where everything was ruined, I guess. I definitely spiraled out of control. Within that time period, I did have my second daughter after my miscarriage. My husband and I were actually divorced, and we got together again and had her. And it was always been tumultuous, like our whole relationship since we were kids. And so that was a different kind of nightmare, and another reason for me to numb out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we're going to move on from this, but I do have one more question about, because I want our listeners to really understand, and I want to understand, why drugs are so dangerous, right? So you said you started with cocaine, and that was kind of it for you. So what happens why is it that you move to the next one? Does the effect not work as much? What's kind of the thought process in moving on to the opiates and then just continuing down that path?
Cocaine is expensive. I wasn't with my husband any longer. And I was approached with opportunity to sell Oxycontin is what it was. And it was a way to fuel my methamphetamine habit and my coke habit, whatever I wanted to do. And so, that's how it led into opiates. I didn't really honestly like that feeling of that high very much. And so when I was introduced to meth, it was just cheaper and easier and what I was looking for, I guess. So.
Yeah. And of course, at that point, you're so very vulnerable.
Yeah. I was a single mom. I had my daughters. At the time, I didn't use with my second pregnancy, with my second daughter, my first or my second daughter. And I would like to believe I was a good mom, even during my mistakes during that time. And then once I got into using meth and around those people, that changed my whole life. It was the circumstances that I surrounded myself with that it made it very difficult to do anything else. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. It was truly a trap. Like you were truly trapped in this.
And I didn't have any family it's always been just me. I'm the one that keeps our family together. So I definitely couldn't rely on my parents. Anybody that did care about me, of course, kept me at arm's length with reason. I had a couple adults, a couple people really step up for me and be there for me. But it was really hard on them. It was really hard on them to see what I was doing to myself, see what I was doing to my children, when they knew I was so much better than the life I was living.
Yeah. So, Jody, and thank you so much for your vulnerability, by the way. I know this can't be easy to share about. I do believe that the more that we can understand those who have walked through foster care in whatever way, the more we can develop compassion. And that's our desire here at TFI, is to help others see the person, see Jody behind this, right? Like when you just look at someone who's on drugs, there's a person behind that, a person who has needs and who needs love and who's struggling and hurting.
That's one of my biggest statements too and thoughts, is that a lot of times people just don't end up choosing to do drugs and ruin their life. It's definitely, a process and stuff until we get there.
Right.
And it's definitely never something that you think is going to happen to you. Like you think you can control it, and it definitely controls you. And I became somebody I hated, that I couldn't look at in the mirror. Honestly, even my drug dealers, they would tell me, they're like, what are you doing? Like, you are not cut out for this life. This is not who you are. Like, what are you doing? And, yeah, it was definitely hard. In my addiction, I ended up meeting a man that was 10 years older than me and had been in that world a lot longer than me. And he's the father of my youngest daughter. And this part is always really, really hard for me to admit, but I did use throughout that pregnancy, and hence why she ended up in foster care.
So yeah, that's what led her into, and that's really what led child welfare to enter your story. Do you remember that day?
September 18th of 2012. I took a pregnancy test that morning and found out I was pregnant. And a few hours later, about 9:00 a.m., CSD showed up at my door. Child welfare showed up at my door for a concern about my two oldest children. And pretty rapidly, my world started spiraling really, really quick. Within 3 weeks, my oldest daughter was removed and placed with her father. And within 6 weeks, my middle daughter was removed and placed with her father that she had never known. So she was 3.5 and never known her father, and was placed with him. And then when my youngest daughter was born, she went into care right from the hospital and stayed with her foster family.
So what does that do to a mom? What are you feeling in those times?
Man, so I had been a single mom to my daughters. And so without them, I didn't know who I was. And I didn't know how to live without them. And I didn't know, one, how I could possibly bring another child into this world. I didn't know. It was so much guilt. There was so much guilt that I carried, and a lot of feelings like I was no better than my own mom. I had ruined their lives, and I disrupted their lives with my behavior, and that's really hard to carry for me. In the 10 months of my pregnancy with my third daughter, I was dealing with CSD. I was dealing with child welfare, and I was navigating a custody case for my middle daughter. I lost our apartment, and so then I was homeless and couch surfing, and I knew I didn't have anywhere to bring my baby home. There was no home really to bring her to. I had a bedroom at my mom's house that I was able to stay, and it was a safe place. But I was delusional. Honestly, I was delusional, thinking I was going to be able to bring her home. And so in the hospital, CSD showed up and held their court hearing in my hospital room. I was alone. And a few days later, I was released and she stayed. And by the grace of God, she didn't have any issues at birth. She still doesn't, because of my drug use, which I thank him for every day. But that day, leaving the hospital, was probably the closest to death I've ever been to taking my own life. I'd done so much damage that I didn't know how to come back from it. I definitely didn't think I deserved to be a mom. So that was really hard to navigate. And I was released on a Saturday, and I wasn't able to see her again for 4 days until I at the office at the agency.
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy. Not to mention you had just literally given birth. So your whole body
I had
is
a C-section, and I
all
had
the effects of
tubes
afterbirth
tied too.
without a baby.
Yeah.
We're going to move forward a little bit to around 2015, because unfortunately things just got worse, didn't they? You actually really hit rock bottom in a county jail. And yet that seems like when things started to actually shift and change. Tell us about that.
I was picked up on charges, and I went to county jail, and I was there from April 26th, and a few days later on May 3rd, a church service came in, and I knew of God. I knew heaven was a better place. I knew if I was a good person, maybe I'd get there. And so I didn't have a whole lot of background in that area. And so I had asked, Jesus to save me a couple times in youth group and church services before, and waited for this miraculous thing to happen. And I'm like, okay, nothing today. And I just wasn't ready to let go of my control, is what I finally realized, is that I wasn't ready. I had always been in control of my life, and I wasn't doing so great at it anymore. And I didn't know who to turn to or what to do. And I asked, and I accepted Jesus into my heart, and it changed from that day forward. I didn't know how to really pray. And so I just prayed that he would lead me in his will and his way, and that I would be strong enough to accept whatever that looked like. And I prayed that same prayer for over a year, because I didn't know what I was doing. And the world seemed real difficult to navigate sober. And honestly, the main thing is I needed somebody to believe me. I needed somebody to believe me, and nobody on earth believed my truth. And I knew that he knew. And if he created me, then this, he got me to it. He'll get me through it, is definitely what I live by. So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. You shared in this post, I was clean from drugs, but consumed by my shame, guilt, fear, frustrations, and utter sadness surrounding the circumstances I had experienced and created for my 3 daughters. So I think this is really important. So obviously I skipped ahead because you are now clean from drugs when you shared this post. But let's talk about how you got clean, but also what this next stage of healing looked like for you after being clean. Because you did mention just a second ago, life was a lot more difficult being sober.
In jail, I honestly made a deal with God that if he relieved me of the temptation to use drugs and toxic men, that I promised I would never use again, and that I would find a Christian man. And so I kind of made a deal with him. And then after I was released from jail, I went into an intensive outpatient program. or inpatient program, excuse me. And I was there for 7 months.
Okay.
And it was led by the county. And so there was correctional officers in place, and we weren't, allowed to leave. It would have ended up causing more charges for me if I left, like an escape charge if I would have left. And I had never been away from my family. I'd never been away from my kids. I had never had the opportunity in my life to be responsible just for myself. And that was really weird for me. Somebody early on told me, they're like, your kids are being taken care of, whether you like it or not, they are being taken care of. And this is your chance to take care of you. And I took every opportunity I could after that. And I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I just needed a new life. And I didn't know how to get there. So I took every suggestion I had. I was in NA and AA programs, and I just took my treatment seriously and really wanted a different life. And I made a promise to myself that my girls, no matter when they came to find me, that they wouldn't find a puddle, that they would find a woman that they could be proud of, and that fought to stay on the side. I fought to be worth finding. Because I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know, one, if my daughters would want anything to do with me. I didn't know if their fathers would make it difficult. And I didn't know about my youngest daughter, what that looked like whatsoever. And so part of my relapse prevention plan was, what happens if I stay clean and I still don't get my way and being able to see them. And so I had to get really strong and know that it was me and Jesus against the world. And so, yeah.
Wow. So that's amazing. And at this time, kind of when you now find yourself clean and you're making these good steps forward, I shouldn't say find yourself clean. You have worked very hard to get clean. And you found yourself with a new role though. And that was one of caring for your nephews as your brother was battling his own addiction. So all of a sudden now you are coming at the child welfare system from a whole different side as a kinship caregiver, a family caregiver. So what was it like to navigate working with CPS now this time around?
Jamie, I want to back up just a little bit to say that
Sure.
After I got out of treatment, I went into sober living for 6 months. The program was a year long. And so after I got into Oxford and clean living, I met my now husband, and we knew each other in high school, and we dated from our first date till the day we got married was 5 months. And he comes from a very, very strong Christian background. And so that was difficult for his family to accept, but it's amazing. We have an amazing marriage, and without him, there's no way that I would have ever had that opportunity to foster my nephews. So to answer your question, yes, I was married. I was living, we were living in our home, and I was having visitations with both my daughters again, and starting to talk more with my youngest daughter's family and navigating that. And then my brother had led a life of addiction as well, him and his girlfriend, and they had 2 sons, and he had asked us to take in his oldest son, 8th grade, right before 8th grade. And so we did. And then things kind of got worse for his parents. And so about 6 months later, I went and picked up my youngest nephew, who was 2.5 at the time. And I honestly met his mom on the street and just gave her the option, kind of gave her the alternative, like either I take him or I call CSD, because those were the only options. So of course it was only 2 years since I I mean,
Wow.
was dealing with them. And so there is no way that I thought if I called them that they would allow me to keep my nephews. And we have nobody, we have no family to help. Like I am it. And so we navigated it. We navigated it for the first 18 months. My husband sold a lot of his belongings to care for, to pay for childcare. My brother gave us a little bit of money. And we tried to navigate visitation on our own. And that was really hard, having addicts come into my home and everything that comes with that. And so eventually we ended up having to call CSD due to some circumstances and ask for help. I didn't know how to help them. And I felt as his sister that he thought I would just always do it until he got it together. And so calling them was very difficult and took a lot of praying.
Wow. How did he respond to that, your brother?
I mean, he was very, very upset, very, very upset. Of course, we have, I think, a diluted idea of what the agency does and how, what their mission is. And because of my circumstance, they definitely had no faith in the system that it could be good. And so, honestly, my family disowned me, Jamie, after that. Like, my parents didn't talk to me. My siblings didn't speak to me. And so that was a decision I had to make, and what I told my brother was that I've loved him all my life, and I had to choose to love his voice more in this moment. And that's what I did.
And now here you are with all that you've gone through from little on up. You want to be a safe space for other moms. Like, you are here caring about others, and you have experienced the hope of Jesus, and you want to share that. You're a recovering addict that turned into an advocate for the underserved and often forgotten women. I mean, that's a pretty cool new name, right? New title, from addict to advocate. Is there anything else that you have learned in your journey that you really want to pass on to others who are maybe walking the same road right now?
One of my biggest fights in this world right now is for every child that is adopted produces a birth mom in the world. And so that separation causes a whole new identity. And so I feel like there's, the statistics say like there's this many kids that were adopted this year. Well, that means that's how many moms are now living without their children and trying to navigate life and loss. And that was my biggest struggle, is that I used to say, I grieve the living, and it was really hard. Today, I say I coexist with loss and live in, a positive way. What I would like to say, I guess, to maybe the moms that are struggling, once we lay down shame, we open our hearts to Jesus and let his light shine into us. I feel like it's really our only hope, because the people that we've been associating with do not have our greater good in mind. And I guess I would like to say that you were created for a purpose, and that purpose isn't to live in pain and shame and guilt and anger and sadness. And we always have a choice. I live by a saying that's choose your heart, and with choice comes change. And we get to choose. We get to choose to stay in the trauma and in the drama, or we get to choose a different path. And that path takes support and takes people to help. And I don't feel like there's a lot of that out there. And that's why I'm trying to create a safe space for moms, especially moms from, I guess, like birth moms that were created from birth first moms, whatever you want to say, created from foster care adoption. There's a divide in the birth mom community, like for for mothers that choose to place in domestic adoption and mothers that, lose their children or their rights are terminated. And so there's this weird divide in that community. And I would like to definitely bridge that gap. And any mom is always welcome in my world, at my table. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I thank you for sharing that. I would love to also know, Jody, what does your relationship look like with your daughters today?
During COVID, my oldest daughter moved in with us. And so I got to spend half of her like junior and senior year she spent with us, which was amazing. And it was amazing. And then I regained custody of my middle daughter in February of 2017. So only 6 months before my nephew came to live with us. And then my youngest daughter, she was adopted by her foster family. She's only been with one family. And she was adopted.
Okay.
And we have open communication. I have open communication with her parents. I get to attend her sporting events and celebrate her from afar. I try to have so much respect for her parents and her family and what that looks like to navigate. They've been fostering for 20 years, and I'm the first parent that has stayed clean. And so this is new for them.
Wow.
And navigating a mom that's never going to go away. And so I have respect for, her parents, especially her mom, that I can only imagine how hard that would be to be taking care of her on a daily basis. And then the minute that she sees me, it's all like love and joy, and she just wants to be with us. And I think that that's hard, maybe. And so I really try to let them navigate their family dynamic on their side. And I write to her often. So interesting fact, I grew up in a really small town of 2,500 people from like junior high, and that family lives there as well. And so my daughter was placed in the same town of our little community. And so like I had attended school with their daughters and whatnot. And so we know a lot of mutual people in such a small town. And that's been kind of difficult for us. Like currently my niece attends school with my youngest daughter. And so it's always like this weird dynamic. And I don't really know my place a lot of times or what is fair, I guess, to everybody. And so my daughter is now 10 and a half. And I am so excited to report that her family allowed my oldest daughter to take my youngest daughter to ice cream for the first time alone. And it was a huge gift. And so, and the sibling relationship is so important to me for them. And if that has to be navigated outside of me, I'm happy to step out, as long as they can navigate being together. And so it's just hard to find your place on this side of adoption.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, Jody, thank you. That's real. I would love to ask you, just as we close out here, I appreciate so much all that you've shared today. And I feel like you've given me a new insight. And I think that this will be some of the things you've said and your experiences I'll be thinking about long after this interview. But I would love it if you'd be willing to speak to your daughters now, as if they were standing right here listening. What do you want them to know?
I want them to know my love has no bounds, that I believe in them explicitly, and I will be here to support them in whatever life takes them through, whatever life brings them to, and we will get through it. I want to say thank you for standing by me, for loving me, for still wanting to be a part of my life, because they have a choice in that too. And yeah, so thank you for giving me a second chance at being a mom. It is by far the greatest gift and privilege that I have in my life.
Jody, thank you so much.
Of course. No, of course.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.